Picture this. The grocery bill keeps climbing, but the cart somehow still looks empty. Meat used to feel like the first thing to cut, yet it doesn't really have to disappear. There are certain meats that quietly stretch a budget without making meals feel smaller. And the interesting part is how often they're ignored. But after watching this video of 15 meats you must have in your budget, you won't ever ignore them again. So without further ado, let's get into it. 1. Ground turkey. Ground turkey is one of those meats that keeps popping up in budget conversations. It's often priced lower than beef, and it blends into a lot of meals without drawing attention to itself. People notice how it stretches. Tacos one night, pasta the next, maybe leftovers after that. It also tends to cook quickly, which saves time and energy. And so, over time, it becomes one of those default proteins that quietly reduces food spending without feeling like a downgrade. Now 2. Chicken thighs. Chicken thighs fall into a similar category. They're usually cheaper than chicken breasts, but they don't shrink as much when cooked. That's something people only realize after a few grocery trips. Because they stay juicy, smaller portions still feel satisfying. They also reheat well, which makes leftovers more reliable instead of forgotten. 3. Whole chicken. Whole chickens are another one that quietly saves money. Not because they're fancy, but because they're kind of 3 meals pretending to be one. Roasted once, leftovers the next day, bones turned into broth later. People often underestimate how far one chicken actually goes. It is less about cooking skill and more about using everything that's already there. 4. Pork shoulder. Pork shoulder tends to sit there in the meat case looking massive and intimidating. But that size is actually the point. One cut can feed several meals, especially when cooked low and slow. It freezes well after cooking, which adds even more value. Over time, people notice it replaces multiple smaller purchases with one planned decision. 5. Beef chuck roast. Beef chuck roast isn't the steak people usually reach for, but it's reliable. When cooked properly, it breaks down and fills out meals in a way that pricier cuts don't always justify. It works especially well in stews, shredded beef dishes, or slow-cooked meals. The richness makes meals feel complete, even when paired with inexpensive sides. 6. Beef shank. Beef shank is another cut that doesn't get much attention. It's tougher, sure, but that toughness is tied to value. Slow cooking turns it into something rich and filling, especially for soups and stews. Because it's often bone-in, it adds flavor without needing much seasoning. People usually realize later how much depth it adds for the price. 7. Frozen chicken drumsticks. Frozen chicken drumsticks are often cheaper than fresh cuts, and they're one of those things that don't really lose much quality when frozen. People like how predictable they are. Same size, same cooking time, same results. They're easy to portion out, which reduces waste. That predictability makes weekly planning feel simpler. 8. Ground beef in bulk. Ground beef in bulk also shows up here, especially the higher fat versions. It's usually cheaper, freezes well, and fits into almost anything. What stands out is how often it's used in small amounts to stretch meals. A little goes a long way when combined with rice, beans, or vegetables. That flexibility makes it a long-term budget staple. 9. Pork chops family packs. Pork chops bought in family packs tend to follow the same pattern. Individually, they don't seem special, but when frozen and spaced out, they quietly reduce how often meat has to be bought again. They're quick to cook, which helps avoid last-minute takeout. Over time, they become part of a routine rather than a splurge. 10. Turkey legs. Turkey legs are one of those cuts that feel underrated. They're big, flavorful, and often priced low. In soups or beans, they add depth without needing much else. One leg can flavor an entire pot, which spreads the cost across several meals. That kind of efficiency tends to go unnoticed at first. 11. Chicken backs and necks. Chicken backs and necks are rarely talked about, but they show up in some of the cheapest broth setups. They're not about eating directly as much as what they create. Homemade stock from these cuts can replace store-bought versions repeatedly. People often realize later how much money that quietly saves over time. 12. Ham hocks. Ham hocks aren't flashy, but they're powerful. A small piece flavors a large dish, especially beans or greens. They're usually inexpensive compared to how much impact they have. Because they're used slowly, one purchase can last multiple meals. It's a classic example of flavor doing more than volume. 13. Canned tuna. Canned tuna is often mentioned for a reason. It's shelf-stable, usually affordable, and doesn't require much planning. People like how it fills gaps between grocery trips. It works as a backup protein when fresh food runs low. That reliability is part of its value. 14. Chicken sausage. Chicken sausage can sometimes cost less than expected, especially when bought on sale. Since it's already seasoned, it reduces the need for extra ingredients. That convenience often leads to fewer impulse purchases. It also makes simple meals feel more complete with minimal effort. 15. Hot dogs. Hot dogs, surprisingly, still show up in budget talks. Not as a health statement, just as a cost one. They're cheap, easy, and filling, especially when paired with simple sides. People tend to underestimate how often they save a meal from becoming takeout. Over time, that adds up more than expected. So looking back, these meats all share something in common. They tend to do more than expected. Whether it's lasting longer, freezing better, or stretching across multiple meals, they quietly support a tighter food budget without demanding attention. If you like this kind of videos, make sure to like and subscribe, and if you want to see more similar content, click on one of the videos showing at your screen right now.